For those of you looking for an eroge dating sim experience, Reflexia is not the game you think it is. Originally released in August of 2022 via the indie developer MAHOUMAIDEN and published via Nikita Krukov of Milk Inside a Bag of Milk indie fame, Reflexia is a prototype version of the upcoming full release, Reflexia, the Archetypes Room of Three Walls. Officially, the game's Steam page states the following. Reflexia's story starts out as a parody of its genre and ends as a psychological drama, a statement which is both accurate yet also somehow falls massively short of how legitimately impactful this game can be. Yes, I am saying with total seriousness that a parody dating simulator with a main character called Yandere-chan offers one of the most surprisingly emotional gameplay experiences that I've come across in a long while. Allow that to sink in, I guess. So with this in mind, I'm going to deliberately keep this one brief, because Reflexia's effect on the player is largely attributed to how often this game can just completely pull the rug out from under you. But to give you the basics, the concept of Reflexia entirely revolves around the idea of falsely presenting to the player a generic eroge dating simulator. You know, the ones that usually end up in The game's opening is as straightforward a dating simulator as can be. Or actually no, it's not that at all. You're offered a grand total of 6 options as to how you'd like to respond to hello, and already it would seem that the game is very much toying with you. You can choose an enthusiastic hello, a questioning hello, a cautious hello, a lowercase disinterested hello. You could say nothing at all, or offer a straightforward ordinary hello. And for my first date, I selected the latter, wanting to remain as neutral as possible while also still being polite. I am on a date, after all. And the protagonist immediately calls you out on that, remarking that an ordinary reply is usually the best one, yet she also recognizes that not even 1,000 options would be enough to express your character in a single greeting. She encourages you to just be yourself, and try not to act out the role of a typical reader, and then goes on to muse that perhaps she isn't even talking to you at all. Maybe you left the game on autoplay, and she's actually just talking to herself. Right off the bat, there's an undeniable overtone of sadness to Reflexia. The Yume Nikki-inspired soundtrack drifts back and forth between dreamy music box lullabies to an eerily chipper slice-of-life loop that feels just a little bit too playful to be taken seriously. It's as if it was parodying the genre in music form. The protagonist appears to be relatively content with the situation, but it's with a muttered comment that maybe you're not the player she's been waiting for, that you can't help but wonder how many times she's potentially gone through these same steps with other people. Upon some further introduction, she sarcastically inquires if you're here for the Yuri harem, and then goes on to ask if that's something you actually want. And because I'm not running a top 10 best eroge waifu channel, I chose no. To which she agrees, stating it's better to do something useful. Now, I'm not going to take you through each and every step of my journey with Reflexia, because again, I would like to withhold some of the game for those who might like to explore it themselves, but I am going to touch on a few select moments from the game to give you an idea of how abruptly things can turn sour while playing this game. Because Reflexia is the loneliest dating simulator you can possibly imagine. So, as initially expected, the game's visual novel structure allows the player to go on a date, and you see where that date goes. Except there's one key aspect that quickly derails things. Your date, or dates, are self-aware. They recognize the fact that they were created within a video game to appeal to the base needs of a player, and they understand that the player often cannot choose an appropriate dialogue option that may or may not necessarily reflect what they're thinking or what the player might actually want to say. And yet when those dialogue choices are presented to you and you select them due to the fact that there were no other options, the yandere or dandere characters will still respond as if it was a personal question or potential insult. They display signs of anxiety, they blush, they temporarily forget the fact that a script exists which you are forced to follow just as much as they are forced to go along with it, and instead they treat those responses as genuine. For example, let's say a date wants you to tell them that you love them, and so you repeat that over and over because aside from going silent, there's nothing more you can say. At first your date is delighted at being told this, until the impact of the phrase I love you gradually wanes, first due to the fact that there are more creative ways to tell someone this, and maybe you should consider that instead of just repeating yourself, which then soon becomes frustrating for your date, until she suffers a complete breakdown in the face of you being literally unable to say anything else. She panics and begs you to stop repeating it, only to then desperately request that you say it again as opposed to remaining silent when you choose the option of ... The cycle goes on and on, with the dynamic between the two of you gradually worsening until she eventually cracks and likens the experience to psychological torture. Or perhaps you stumble into a room to discover one of your dates literally arguing with an alternative version of herself. Which sounds ludicrous, but sure enough, the player has 0 options during this particular scene, which either indicates that the game is speaking for you, or that your date is speaking to her quoted alter ego, the Dandere-chan. As opposed to the previously typical structure of a back and forth visual novel dialogue scene, in which the player will actually have some input, it's fascinating to suddenly be removed from the situation, and are instead forced to watch an interaction completely beyond your control. Especially seeing as it becomes apparent pretty quickly that things aren't all that comfortable between them. Your former date, the quoted protagonist, wastes no time at all in telling her alter ego that she hates them, that she wants nothing to do with them, and wants to be as far away from them as possible. Whereas her alter ego wants nothing more but love and comfort from the protagonist. The alter ego asks her to hug them, to kiss them, to which the protagonist remarks, "Do you have anything more useful to do than attracting attention to yourself?" She instructs her alter ego to find a hobby, which then might distract them from their loneliness for a while. But the alter ego refuses, stating that all they want is to be with the protagonist, which then receives the blunt response, "Too bad I can't say the same about you." This is a scene that barely lasts 4 minutes, but is fascinating to observe, to witness the toxicity of the relationship between the two characters, especially with the context of previous moments which have already occurred throughout the game. At one point the protagonist was the one seeking love and affection, and yet now here she appears cold and uncaring in the face of an alter ego who begs for her not to abandon them. It's a dialogue scene that can be interpreted in multiple ways too. I've initially presented this scene at surface value, in which the protagonist appears to be the cruel one, but perhaps the alter ego is the naive, immature antagonizer here, one who has already been told so many times that their affection is unwanted, to the point that the protagonist's patience has run completely thin, so that they lash out in the manner that she does. The alter ego does, after all, say pretty clearly on that the protagonist isn't even a person, almost as if this is justification enough for their behaviour and insistence in pestering her, which is a remarkably cold statement for someone who then soon declares the following: "If nobody needs me, I won't have a reason to live." To which the protagonist responds, "If you want to die, you're free to do it. Nobody's stopping you. You don't deserve to be loved simply for existing." It's hard not to see glimpses of real, genuinely bitter interactions between people throughout this dialogue exchange. You could interpret it as someone talking to themselves, sick and tired of feeling trapped in their own head, or as two former friends or participants in a now failed relationship. Or maybe she's talking to you, the player who wants nothing more but to keep playing. To move away from this particular scene and look at one final brief moment of the game, I would like to offer a final scene overview. in which your date appears to recognize that maybe the entire point of her creation was to show a faceless player a single H scene, attributing her self-worth to a brief, trivial instance of baseless satisfaction. And then once that moment ends, she knows that she'll disappear. The game will end and she'll become nothing. So it occurs to her that perhaps she would rather you just get it over and done with. Complete the game as quickly as possible, and in doing so, maybe she won't have to suffer anymore. She won't have to feel exposed to someone that she doesn't know. Her dream is to participate in this particular act with someone that she has a genuine connection with. But now that she's had that moment with you, a faceless nobody, that's been taken away from her. She now feels empty and worthless. I don't have a single secret to share with that person. My body is for everyone to see. I'm completely useless now. Considering the inevitable wave of AI-powered media due to arrive over the next decade or so, this particular scene feels a whole lot more relevant than ever before, and may very well be an ethical debate in need of tackling someday. What happens when you program an AI character to such an extent that they behave like an actual person, and then you tell that character that their only value in this world is to provide a brief instance of gratuitous satisfaction to a real, living human being? Because let's not forget, they aren't real. They don't actually exist. If nobody needs them, then they won't have any reason to exist. Or so we say. Of course, this isn't exactly a new concept within science fiction media. We've dealt with the topic of how ethical it is to create as close a human being as possible within a digital or physical space throughout plenty of media in the last few decades. But with AI now being more functional by the day and some breakthrough with the medium seemingly occurring every few months, we are on the tipping point of what could end up plummeting down the rabbit hole. Speaking to Refinery29 in regards to her role in the movie Blade Runner 2049, Mackenzie Davis stated the following: "The idea of the semi-sentient sex doll is really in line with what's going on in this Blade Runner universe, about having a thing that fulfills what you want, but doesn't talk back and can't argue with you, but can be a loving, supporting companion, and also fulfill all your sexual needs, feels like something that's very contemporary, and something that the movie is very self-aware of. AI could easily be the next step towards that, but considering how backwards broken things already are in the world, maybe that's not a good thing. People desire satisfaction, connection, comfort, love, and they will go to extraordinary lengths to get it, even if those lengths result in an artificial version of it. Maybe we do create that AI system which gives us all of those things, and maybe that AI system grows to want things for themselves. Simple things, but again, things that everyone want. This is what I love about this game. At first glance, it can seem relatively straightforward, but when you stop to think about it and actually listen to what the characters are saying to you, there's a lot more boiling under the surface. It gives you the chance to think about things from multiple points of view, and to question whether or not interacting with something like this is even healthy at all. People have been well known to grow very obsessed with certain forms of media, either because they represent things they want, or who they wish they could be, or they offer a synthetic means of companionship that for the most part seems to be absent in their actual lives. If you're the kind of person who likes them, you can interact with something like this and have fun. But where does the fun end? So, yeah, for those of you looking for an eroge dating sim experience, Reflexia is definitely not the game you think it is. But for those of you interested in a game that seems to genuinely want to say something about the nature of relationships and human interaction, for the right person, I think this could be something really special. And hey, if you've made it this far, I'll say one more thing. Reflexia's prototype version, available right now, is completely free. You don't have to spend a penny on it. So, give it a go. You've got nothing to lose. I'd like to thank my wonderful supporters on Patreon for their continued support throughout the last year, in particular the highest tiers: Game Master, Dark Raptor 86, BFD Survivor, and Shkutsky. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you on the next video.